Hey everyone! I would really like to play around with this thing some more because I just didn't get to drive it a whole lot last time. But before I can do that, there is a few things we're going to have to fix on this. And I know that in the last video of this, I said that I wasn't going to do a whole bunch of work to this right now. And I'm not. This is hopefully not going to be a bunch of work. But I would just really like to bring this up to a point where it's at least, well, useful might not be the right word, but at least drivable so that I can just get into this, fire it up, and drive it around here a bit. That would make it much easier to test this out some more and figure out exactly what work needs to be done. But also, it's just much easier to handle these things when they can move themselves around. So this here is the Rusty Unimog 416 that I picked up the other day. We brought it back here and got it fired up. There's a whole video on that where I'm also explaining a lot more about this. So if you haven't seen that one, I'm going to leave a link for it down in the description if you want to check it out. But this time it's going to be much more about making sure the driveline is good, fixing the brakes, and just making it drivable so we can hopefully play around with it down here a little bit. I'm also going to see if I can do something about that sticking throttle pedal, hopefully make it a little more smooth to drive. Maybe even see if we can get that hand throttle to work so I can hold a slightly better idle on this thing. And we should probably also see if we could actually get the diff locks to work on this, because as long as we don't have any weight on this, it's not going to want to flex much and it's going to be very dependent on those lockers. But let's get this fired up and get it inside. Alright, so first, I just gotta point out that the air system in this thing seems to be in remarkably good condition. Not only does the compressor pump it up really quickly, but when I got in it just now, it still had over 5 bars of pressure in the system, even though it's been parked out there for 3 days now. Usually the air seeps out pretty quick, but apparently this has practically no leaks in that system. That's really quite impressive, especially given the overall state of the rest of the truck. But we do have some other things leaking in this, and one of them is the hydraulic part of the brake system. Well, to be fair, it's not really leaking anymore because there's no fluid left in it. So one of the reservoirs has just been disconnected and plugged off, but I assume that was to just keep the fluid in there because this reservoir is shared with the clutch. And it would have run out of fluid pretty quick if they left it connected because both of the brake lines have rusted off right down here. So this line would have been for the clutch, but they've just rerouted that and put a hose on it and just pulled the whole thing around. And the other two connectors here are for the first and second brake circuit. This one looks like it's connected, but they just put a rubber hose on there for no real good reason. It's still rusted away underneath that. So my hope is that I can just fix this first part of these brake lines and we can try and bleed the system and hopefully regain some function in those brakes. But I probably just have to point out that the stuff that I'm doing here now, it's not an attempt to restore the brake system or do any proper repair to it. I just want to try and make this stuff functional enough so that I can drive this thing a bit and move it around safely here on my own property. I'm not taking any of this out on the road or around anything else until I'm sure that everything has been gone through and repaired properly and that everything is working correctly, which of course we're not going to get into any of that anytime soon. So the old Unimogs, they use what is commonly called an air over hydraulic brake system, which means that you are combining the air system and the hydraulic brake system. And because the Unimogs are such versatile machines, they could be ordered with a lot of different setups depending on what you needed, which also means that there are many different ways that these combined air and hydraulic systems could have been set up. It sounds more complicated than it is, especially on this truck, because we're not really using the air system for a whole lot on this one. The only thing we're really doing with the air system on this is to power our brake booster. It's a big diesel engine, so we don't have any vacuum, so we are using pressurized air for the booster rather than a traditional vacuum booster. But other than that, the rest of the actual brake system is more or less a conventional hydraulic brake system like you would find on a lot of smaller cars and vans and such. So as for that hydraulic part of the system, these older Unimogs generally just had a very simple single circuit drum brake setup. They did for a while have dual circuit drum brakes. That is what is on my other 416 Unimog. But on this one, they moved over to dual circuit disc brakes. That in itself is not really unusual. What is a little bit unusual is that we have not just 4, but 6 brake calipers. And from this generation forward, we also have an ALB valve in the system. So in general, you always have more powerful brakes in the front than you do in the rear. This is not just for Unimogs, but really for any road-going vehicle. And the reason for that is simply you don't want to risk locking up those rear wheels before the fronts, because if that happens, the rear is going to start sliding out to one side or the other. And of course, the bigger and heavier the vehicle, the more of a problem that is. Now, on the older models with drum brakes, they just did this by simply having more powerful wheel cylinders up in the front. But on this one, we have dual calipers up in the front instead. And also, it is equipped with this load sensing valve, or the ALB valve, that is adjusting the brake pressure depending on the height of the axle. So the more of a load you have on it, the more it's allowing brake pressure to reach the rear wheels, or in this case, also the front. Now, we don't have any type of trailer brakes on this truck. If we did, there would be a lot more to it on the air part of the brake system. Well, here's hoping that I can get the rusty bits out of these 2 brake hoses down here so that all I have to do is make a new set of lines for this first bit from the master cylinder down here. Gonna have a better chance if we can put a socket on them. Let's just give it a try before we start doing all kinds of tricks. Oh, that came right out. Nice. I don't think we're going to be that lucky with the ones down there on the hoses. There's a chance they're just going to spin. Was that it? That really was it. Wow, wasn't expecting that. I mean, look at this thing. It's not even remotely hexagonal anymore. It's just all rusted away, but the whole lower half of it seems to be all right. Unfortunately, the lines themselves look like they are full of some kind of dirt or debris down in there. So rather than trying to push all of that into the brake system, I think we're going to disassemble them a little further back and blow some compressed air, see if we can push that back out of those lines that have been open. I can get to both lines on the ALB valve back here, so we'll just open them up here and see if we can blow some air back through them, get all that dirt out, if they come off, and it seems like they do. All right, so this should be the first circuit. Well, it sounded like we got something through that, so let's try the other. Well, that's unfortunate. We don't really have any hole through this second line. You can't really tell on camera, but I can see there's still rust blocking the hole down there. Maybe that whole hose has just collapsed. I'm not hearing it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this brake hose is just collapsed on the inside. I can't get anything through there. I was hoping it was just some dirt up here at the top. Ah, that's a bummer. I don't have any hoses on hand. Oh, that came right off. Beautiful. There's already some fluid dripping out of this. That's promising. But just to be sure, I'm going to go back and blow some air through it again just to make sure we got some fluid coming out of that. Oh, yeah. All right, so now that I know that it is this hose down there that is blocked, I'm just going to do this completely the wrong way. I mean, we might as well, because we already have something really weird going on with the clutch here. They just cut that line and put a hose on it that is just bypassing everything. So I'm going to do kind of the same. I'm just going to put a hard line on this port and just run it directly down and connect to that other pipe down there, just bypassing that hose entirely. You know, for how much I use this, I should probably get a better flaring tool. Actually, come to think of it, I think I bought this kit all the way back when I was getting my very first Unimog running. Yeah, this should do. All right. Well, that should do the trick. Now we have the second circuit connected, and the first circuit is still connected up there through the brake hose. Now, again, I have to point out, this is not the correct way to do it. This will eventually fatigue and break because it doesn't have this hose connection down here. But again, we're not trying to do it correct. We're just trying to make it functional to drive around out back here. It's not going to go out on the road or anything with any of this stuff. Everything down here is incorrect anyway, so it all has to be redone. So, final pipe on here, and before I go and tighten these two into the master cylinder, I'm just going to take this back out. I just want to put some fluid through this and try to blow it out because I can see there is a little bit of rusty, murky, dirty stuff in there. I don't want to put that into the brakes if we can avoid it. Oh yeah. We don't even have to press the brake to flush this out. It's already running through. Very nice. This one probably haven't had anything in it for years. Also the one that seemed to have the most dirt in that port, so just give those brakes a light touch. Well, that was some dirty, rusty stuff coming out of that. That's really not what I wanted to see. Also, it wasn't really spraying out with any force, it was sort of just spitting a little bit. And now that it's open like this, it really should be slowly running from the reservoir down and dripping out of there, but it's not even doing that. That's really not a great sign. This thing may have taken some damage from just sitting without fluid and being open to the elements for some time. Well, that would be a bummer, but you know, it was still moving some fluids, so let's give it an honest chance. We won't really know. It might still build a little bit of pressure, so let's just put the rest of the system together and give it a chance. Just gonna get this guy up on some jack stands. Well, it wasn't going to be that easy, was it? I was just down here looking for the bleed screw, and I noticed we have another line that's rusted out right here. There we go. Now that's the one that runs down to this caliper back here. I'm pretty sure that's the one that's on the first circuit, so we definitely want that part working. So we're going to have to do something about that. Right, well, let's get those wheels off and have a better look. Well, now that I am down here anyway, let's just check the other side. Well, I mean, it doesn't look good. It will definitely need replacement at some point, but for now, I think it's going to hold. It doesn't look like it's leaking or just about to fall off. Let's see if this will do. Oh, yeah. I was sure I was gonna have to fight this thing. But hey, now I get to show you guys this double brake caliper setup after all. So right there is the line we want to replace, runs down and up into the caliper. It's pretty straightforward. Actually, we might want to replace this other line as well. That looks like it's just about to go right there. Yeah, let's just give it 2 new ones now that we're here. There we go. We'll just make a copy of that. Just like that, we have our new set. Right, that should do the trick. Might give that a zip tie just to keep it in place, but other than that, let's finally go and see if we can loosen up some of these bleed screws. Just going to feel it first, see if we need heat or something. Oh no, that went out really easy. Nice. I can bleed the master cylinder itself, if these can open, that is. Well, it did something. Oh yeah, there we go. Just making sure this is primed. Right, let's finally give this a try. Would have been handy if I had someone else here, but I'm on my own this evening, so we'll have to manage. Nice. Oh yeah. Nah, it's still just going to the floor. Bummer. Well, people, I think I'm gonna have to call it here. I've been spending the entire evening trying to bleed the air out of this system, and I'm at a point where I do have fluid throughout the entire system, but it is just not building pressure. There were a few times where it felt like it was building some pressure, and then it just disappeared again. So I think it's leaking internally in that master cylinder, and the fluid is just flowing back and forth in there. Well, that really is quite unfortunate. But I honestly did fear that this thing may have been damaged by sitting dry and open for a long time, because the exact same thing had happened on my other Unimog 416 when I got that. The cylinder on that had also been sitting dry and open for a really long time, and it was all rusted and pitted on the inside, so I couldn't even rebuild it. I had to get a new cylinder for that as well, and these things are pretty expensive. I mean, what are the odds that I have that thing happening to both of my 416s? This is not a part you usually replace. Normally you can just rebuild them. But, you know, other than having just wasted a bunch of time trying to get this working, I'm not really mad about it, because this is exactly the kind of stuff I was trying to find out. I wanted to get a better idea of how much work had to be done to this Unimog, and clearly the entire brake system has to be gone through and completely overhauled. So I guess that's one thing. We're just gonna have to live without brakes for now. But I'm not gonna spend any more time on this stuff. Let's go ahead and look at the rest of the driveline instead, try and check all of that out while we have it up on the jack stands. So what I want to do first to start checking out this driveline is to just drain the oil out of everything. Out of the transmissions, the axles, and the portals. Just get the stuff out of there because, well, at this point, I don't even know if there is oil in it. I assume there is, but whatever's in there is probably decades old. The only thing that I do know has oil in it is the gearbox, because I did pull this dipstick. Well, you can't really see now because I've been driving it, but I pulled this dipstick before I started driving it around, and it was looking like some really milkshake stuff that was in there. So there's no doubt some water from condensation in all of these gears. And I just don't want this machine sitting around with water in all of these essential components. So let's get all this stuff out of there, have a look at it, and hopefully just put some new stuff in it. Let's just start with these gearboxes. So we have the main gearbox and we have the transfer case as well. That is not coming out of there very fast. That is some really thick stuff. But to be fair, it is very cold right now. It doesn't look really terrible. It does have water in it, but other than that, it's pretty clear oil. Let's see if we can get this transfer case. Oh, wow. Maybe not. This is probably going to make a mess. That's some very dark stuff. Well, it's not terrible, but it's not great either, so it's a good thing we're getting this out. But I'm not seeing any traces of metal or anything weird like that. It's just old dirty oil, so pretty happy with that. So, next up, differentials. That looks very rusty. Let's give it a try. That actually worked. Yeah, it's looking pretty dark as well, but still, no metal or anything weird, just old oil. So far, I'm pretty happy with this. And finally, we'll just do the portals. They have a drain plug here and a fill plug up here. There's a fill plug over here as well. I'm only going to film this one because it's easier to see now that we have the wheel off anyway. Well, it's a good thing we checked that. There's absolutely nothing in there. Wow. See if we can get the fill plug out. So I suppose we could just put that drain back in and put some oil in it right away. All the gears in this driveline calls for an SAE 80, I believe, but I'm just using some regular 80 W90. I'm just going to go and do the other side here, and then the whole rear axle as well. But I'm not going to film all of it. It's just going to be more of the same, or almost the same. Hopefully there's going to be oil in some of them. Well, this one had a little bit of oil. Right, so I got the rest of the oil out of this. Everything on the rear axle looked pretty normal. So overall, I'm really quite happy with what I've seen here. Other than that one portal not having any oil in it and the water condensation stuff in the main gearbox, there really wasn't anything alarming about any of the oil. None of it looked extremely dirty or had metal in it or anything like that. So yeah, really quite happy with that. Now, I've already put oil in the front axle. You already saw the portals, and the differential just has a nice big fill plug right in the middle. So let's get some oil in this one. Well, luckily these differentials don't take very much oil. I think it's about 2 liters that go in here, because this thick oil does not want to flow when it is this cold. I don't know why I'm always doing gear oil in the winter time. I think it's about 0 degrees in here right now. Stuff may as well be crude oil. It does not want to flow. This is so thick you could stack it. And finally, we'll get some fresh stuff in this gearbox as well. That just goes right down this dipstick too. This is for both the main gearbox and the transfer case. They do share oil, but there is sort of a wall internally between them, so that's why you drain it from 2 different plugs. Now that we are going over these things, just want to check if we have any play or excessive wear in any of these important bits. Do have a little bit, I don't know if you can hear that. Probably in this lower bearing. Yeah, just enough to make a noise, but not enough to be concerning. And the joint in here looks good too. Little bit of play I feel that's in the gears in the portal. That's supposed to be there. Of course, all the rubber bushings and stuff in all of these moving parts, they are all disintegrating and falling apart. So they're all going to need replacing, but that was pretty much expected. It's most likely still the 50-year-old factory bushings that are in this thing. So really, I am quite happy with what we found on this so far, or rather what we haven't found. It really does seem like the whole undercarriage and driveline on this thing is in pretty decent and definitely salvageable condition. So yeah, quite happy with that. But there is just one more thing I want to have a look at now that we have it up on the jack stands. And for that, I want this wheel back on. That's going to be easier. When we were driving this the other day, I did at one point try to activate the diff locks, but rather than locking, it just started blowing out air somewhere. And I would really like to look into that just to see if we can get those lockers working and see if hopefully it's just a simple leak and there's not something actually wrong with the lockers themselves inside the axle. They can get stuck in there, but I hope they're not, because it's really quite a big job to get into the lockers themselves. You kind of have to take the whole axle off and split apart the entire thing. So hopefully it is just a simple leak, but just at a quick look at it, I can't really see anything obviously wrong. So let's try and hook some air to it and activate those lockers and see if we can find that leak. Even this is rusty. I'm not sure that coupling is gonna work. Nah, this thing is completely seized up. Yeah, never mind. I'll see if I have another one. Let's just get rid of this. Put one of these air couplings in here instead. It's really the right way to do it. Don't really want that big air coupling just sticking out the side like that. It's going to be a bigger chance of knocking that off. And get some air in it. Nice. Okay, so let's try this. First position is the four-wheel drive. Don't hear any leaks there. And then the diff locks. Oh. So I couldn't really see this because it was sitting like this, but there's a little plastic T-piece in the line right here, and as soon as I touched it, the whole thing just split three ways. So that's definitely the first issue. Luckily, that's an easy fix. Cut the old plastic out of this one. And put some new plastic on it. And we'll try again. So we put it in four-wheel drive and diff lock. Still hear a little bit of air seeping out. Well, that's coming from the vent on the axle, so that's a leak internally in the rear axle. Nothing in the front. Okay, let's see if it's locked. Now, the brakes are sticking a little bit on this wheel, so I don't know how easy it's going to be to turn. Not very easy. Well, something happened right there. What about the front? Well, that locked. Oh, yeah. Yep. It's turning that wheel over there. It's very tight because of that brake, but they are definitely locked. Nice. So that means the locker is working both in the front and the rear. Little bit of a leak in the axle on the rear, but nothing catastrophic. I'm really happy with that. Now, next question, will it release those lockers again? Yep, right away. And this one too. Nice. This also means I've seen everything I wanted to see while I had this up in the air, so let's get it down on the ground. And now that I know that the driveline is mostly all right, or at least good enough, and I also know that we have functional diff locks, I really can't help it. We gotta take this thing out and play around some more. Oh yeah, and about this throttle pedal, I think I said in the beginning that I wanted to try and do something to free that up a little bit more, get it to run a little more smooth, but I have tried a few things off camera, and there's just no easy fix for this. The pedal shaft is running through a set of little nylon bushings down here, and I think what has happened is that the shaft has rusted and swollen up, so it's binding against those bushings. The whole thing is going to have to come out and be repaired and get new bushings and all that, but I'm just not going to spend time on that right now. It's going to have to wait until we do the rest of this project. So until we really get to start up this project for good, we're just going to have to live with a weird throttle and no brakes. We can't just drive off without this. In the last video with this truck, one of you guys said that we should name this one the Big Brother because it kind of looks like the bigger version of that. Well, I mean, technically that's exactly what it is, but with them also being roughly the same color, I see what you mean. So as we are ready to head out of here, there is one last thing I want to check, and this is one of the things that is kind of unique to the Unimog, which is these two big ball joints up here on the gearbox. This is where the axles are connecting to the gearbox and thereby to the rest of the vehicle. Because there are no trailing arms or control arms or anything on these, all of your pushing and pulling force of the axles is transferred up through these big joints and into the gearbox and thereby into the chassis. So I just want to see if we have any significant movement or play in these because they do wear. So what I'm going to do is we'll fire it up and I will leave it in rear wheel drive, and then I'm just going to ease off the clutch ever so slightly, just enough to bump the rear wheels and see if we get any movement in that. Might also put some blocks around the front wheels just to keep that in place so we can see the joint up in front as well. But I can't see any of this from inside the cab, so I'll set a camera up here to look at it and then I can check that footage afterwards. So if the throttle sounds a little bit weird, it's because of that sticking pedal in there. That's sort of connected to the cab, so when I'm driving around on this bumpy stuff, it's sort of tapping the throttle on the engine. But I don't really know how much traction I'm gonna have out here. It has been snowing on and off for the past few days and the temperatures have been fluctuating a lot, so yesterday this was all pretty muddy and slippery, but now it's frozen and pretty hard. But I think I'm just gonna let some air out of the tires real quick just to try and help it a little bit, and also to try and smooth it out because it is a very rough ride right now. Because there is absolutely no weight on this truck, the suspension is pretty firm, so it's gonna be very bouncy. Well, it's just at about 2 bars, so they really don't have all that much pressure in them already. So this might not make a big difference. It would obviously be a lot better if we had something heavy that we could put on the back of this. But it's gonna take a lot of weight to compress that suspension, so I don't have anything that is really heavy but also easy to put up there. Well, now I'm curious. I just found an old Unimog wheel. Let's just try and put that up there. Still probably not enough to make a difference. This is only like 100 kilos or something. Well, it was enough to make it bounce a little. All right, we'll leave it at that. I freaking love these things. Even in this condition where it has been neglected for years and the cab is falling apart as I'm driving, I literally have to hold the door to keep it from falling off. But this is still just unstoppable out here. If anything, it just makes it look easy. Let's go back through that hole where we just tore the wheel off the other 416 and we'll call it a day. Well, I don't know if you guys could see that, but on this very last stop, there was just a tiny bit of effect on those brakes, but it was on the very last bit of travel on the pedals, so it's still not really building any pressure, but that was enough for me to know that at least some of the calipers are trying to do something, so that was actually really nice to see. And it also means that we do have at least a tiny amount of stopping power on this thing. But as I think I mentioned a moment ago, this whole cab was just falling apart as I was driving right now. Like, the whole roof is not attached and the gutter was falling off and everything was falling down inside of the cab. And this weird bar on the front, that's also not attached anymore. Probably made some terrible sound on the audio recordings. And this door, it keeps trying to fall off. I had to tie it up with some zip ties just to keep it shut, because if this was allowed to swing out, I'm pretty sure it would just fall off. It's barely hanging on with just the top hinge in there. And the whole floor has fallen out of the cab as well. The only reason it's still there is because it's sitting on top of the spring mount of the chassis. I don't really think it showed on the last video just how rusty the cab is, because some of you were suggesting that I should just keep it looking the way that it is, but that's just not doable. This thing is falling apart. It's gonna need some really extensive repair if we are gonna try to salvage this cab. But other than that very rusty cab, and of course those failing brakes, it really does seem like we have a very solid vehicle underneath. Now that I got to drive it for a bit longer, we got the engine up to temperature and it stayed up there just as it was supposed to, and the oil pressure was looking good the whole time. Everything in the driveline works, the lockers work just fine, the four-wheel drive, the low gears and all that stuff. So I'm really very pleased with this. So it was really nice to get to play around with this thing a little bit more. Now I have a much better idea of the overall condition of this thing, and I can start making some actual plans for it. But for now, those are just going to be plans, because you guys know I have other things to do. But at least this is now in a condition where I can start it up and drive it around here on the lot. So we're gonna end off here. Thank you all for watching along, and I'll see you in the next one.